Hi, everyone. I'm Scott.
Hey, everybody, I'm Adam.
This is Adam. Adam and I have known each other for quite some time. Adam is the co-founder of Doctor on Demand, which is a Web2 company. You may have never heard of it. And then he founded Braintrust. And I had the fortune of funding both companies. One of them I understand a lot better than the other. So I'm really excited to learn more about my investment in Braintrust today with you guys. So we can try to figure out what in the world this is. But before we go there, I want to just do a little more background on Adam because he's pretty special. Like I struggle to find crossover investors, those that have navigated out of Web 2 to Web 3, and we're going to talk a little bit about that in this discussion. And I really struggle to find minds like Adam's. And you guys are going to have a great little treat here. I don't know if you've ever heard him on his talks or his podcasts. It's awesome. So I would love, Adam, if you could just share a little bit about your background, your journey. You got a lot of founders here. What was your first thing you tried and failed miserably at? And then you picked yourself back up and found your way to Doctor on Demand and elsewhere.
Well, I'm a software engineer by training, and that was the first thing I tried and wasn't great at. Studied computer science at Vanderbilt. Barely got out of that school, undergrad, and decided, you know what, I'm not going to be a great engineer, so I'll try my hand at entrepreneurship, and started two-sided marketplaces, and had a bunch of mini failures and finally got one to work in the early 2000s that connected local shoppers online with local stores. So it was like the anti-Amazon kind of shopping online. That was acquired by Intuit. Went on to start my second company called Driverside, which connects car owners with mechanics, local mechanics that have capacity for them. She's starting to see a theme now, kind of local enabled marketplaces. And that was acquired by Advance Auto Parts. And then I moved on to healthcare, where I knew absolutely nothing. I thought, why not build a big business here? And I teamed up with Dr. Phil, who's a daytime television guy and has a big audience.
Great tennis player, too.
Yeah, unbelievable tennis player. The knees are still going at that age. And Dr. Phil had this idea, urgent care sucks. Why don't we let people do it on their phone? And I thought, why not? I started it with a son who's an attorney, so like moderately successful and sort of bad software engineer pairs up with attorney to start a video hospital. And that one worked. It started off great. We had Dr. Phil helping pump the audience, and then COVID hit, and it did 8 years of business in about 6 months, and now it's kind of the new normal.
How many times have you been told that you have a bad idea, and how do you deal with self-doubt?
I mean, doing this with you, I was told was a bad idea. So
I didn't tell you it was a bad idea. Coming up here on stage.
Yeah,
fine. No, Thanks for ignoring
your
that.
Your staff told me this was a bad idea. No.
They never want me to talk about anything in front of anyone.
Yeah, I mean, I've had a lot of investors tell me, a lot of VCs tell me, this is cute or this is going to be too small. It's not for VCs or whatever. And then I've sort of disproven them at moderate scales. Like some of them were kind of right. And then with Doctor on Demand, we, I think executed well and then got lucky. With Braintrust, I thought this would be a breeze of okay, I'm an old guy now. This is my fourth venture-backed startup. I know marketplaces. I know blockchain. This should be easy, right? And we go down to Sand Hill, and we were literally laughed out of boardroom after boardroom. This is 2018, the seed round for Braintrust. We even had one investor who it pains me to not name him, but who said, if you were starting an Indian restaurant or a women's shoe line, I would bet on that. But this is just stupid, and we're going to pass. They now have their own dedicated crypto fund now, by the way.
Right?
They do.
One of those. Those are good stories. And
yeah.
Are those scar tissue that you lean on when people know again?
Yeah, I mean, the nuclear spite furnace can get you pretty far in this world, but I think just having a good idea that you believe in that's actually making the world a better place and closing economic disparities, which is what our country needs the most, I think, is sort of what gets me a little further out of bed than just the spite furnace. But yeah, it doesn't hurt.
Cool. All right, so I mean, we could literally fill the entire time talking about your experience as an entrepreneur. There's one more question I want to ask, or one more point I want to make, and then we'll jump into Web3. You made a decision with Doctor On Demand as the co-founder to not be the CEO. There's a lot of rhetoric out there that founders should fight tooth and nail to hold on to their company forever. You, on the other hand, said, I'm not the right guy to manage this. Can you talk just a little bit about that? I don't want to call it maturity because that suggests others aren't immature, and I don't mean it that way. But how did you have that perspective, and how do you kind of know how to play in your zone? And where
100%. I mean, my goal and dream when I started Doctor On Demand was build a household consumer brand name. I wanted to build something online that everyone will have heard of and find valuable. And I saw this opportunity to build this with Dr. Phil and his son Jay as like, hey, here's the way to do this. And we started off as a cash pay direct-to-consumer app, and then it got about as big as it could get, right? Healthcare, unless you're selling ED pills or hair loss stuff or weight loss stuff, if you're not enterprise, it's not going to work.
You've seen my Amazon bill.
Mine too,
Sorry,
man.
just
Mine
kidding.
And so we plateaued a few years into Doctor On Demand, where I was convinced it was going to be consumer all the way, and our board, we had a lot of really smart investors, Scott and the guys at Venrock, who were like, maybe we should do enterprise as well. And it was obvious that I was not the enterprise CEO. And so we brought in what I still to this day call real manager, Hill Ferguson, and we did a really successful transition. And Hill carried the ball another 4 years, and it looks like we're about to be a really great outcome. But yeah, I mean, it was a very difficult. You never start a company thinking, oh, I'll do this for 4 years and then leave, right? Especially as founder CEO. So I'm not going to say it was a fun decision, and I had a lot of hard nights and hard conversations, but it was the right decision.
You glad you did it in hindsight?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I'm sure you are too.
I'm fine either way. All right, so let's shift gears. Let's talk about Web3. To level set everything, and also so I can understand it, explain Web3 to your grandchildren who haven't been born yet. When they're on your lap and you're like, kiddo, back in my day, there was this Web 2 thing, and then along came, like, give us that for 30 seconds.
First of all, like, it's a ridiculous premise because our grandchildren are going to understand this technology better than anyone in this room.
They'll be on like Web 6 or something.
Yeah, right.
We're gonna have to talk about this transition.
It's like explaining steam engines to your parents, right?
There'll be neural network.
And we won't be talking, right? It'll just be.
Good point.
Yeah.
Deeps and boops.
Yeah. So maybe instead I'll explain it to like my 6-year-old son now.
Fair.
And he's just going to ask, what does that have to do with Minecraft? And move on. But Microsoft, right? And so, look, what Web3 is all about owning and controlling the network where you make your living, right? The premise is simple. The execution is like kind of the messy, fun part we're seeing right now, all these early Web3 experiments. But Web2 was all about creating brand new marketplaces, a brand new economic opportunity using the internet, and the intermediaries are for-profit corporations. Awesome, right? And so the first one probably was eBay, and then fast forward all the way up to the gig economy, right? The DoorDashes and Ubers of the world. And while that created all this new economic opportunity, it had a lot of negative externalities, I would argue. Where if the entity that is running the network where you make your living is a for-profit corporation whose fiduciary is to extract as much value out of that network where you make your living on usually through transaction fees or upsells or marking up whatever, that eventually will, so we call it like the ever-increasing rake, that ever-increasing rake will eventually erode the strong network effects that make that network valuable. Right, and it ends up disenfranchising one or both sides of the marketplace. And you see this playing out, I mean, the early days playing out with Yelp, where restaurants would like sue Yelp to get off the network, right? They were being extorted by Yelp. And then Google and Yelp get into a fight about who can extort restaurants legally. And and then you have restaurants saying like, we'll refuse to take orders through Yelp, that kind of stuff. And then the drivers on Uber, the dashers on DoorDash, like the story goes on and on. The higher the rake, the more misaligned the incentives are between the users, the participants of the network, and the operator. So that's Web 2. Web 3 exists, I think, to to realign those incentives, right? And it does simply this by replacing the for-profit middleman corporation with a nonprofit network, right? And that network is usually just a bunch of smart contracts. It could be, you could call it a DAO these days. I think it's taking software that doesn't need to run a profit and compressing the margin and just taking that margin from Web 2 and just giving it back to both sides, to supply and demand. To me, that's what we call the ownership economy. That's Web 3.
Okay, so my first takeaway is your 6-year-old's a freaking genius. If he understands
Yeah, he would have left
1% of that, it goes straight to college. The second thing, though, what I didn't hear, what I heard you describe is very logical progression from the world we knew to a better world. I don't hear CryptoKitty, ape, NFT, blah, blah, blah in what you just said. But that's a big part of what everyone's talking about. And then there's a whole nother area of like currency creation and speculation. So at least for this conversation, does it make sense just to focus it on this kind of business disruption? Or do you think you can't just focus it there and you need to talk about everything?
Yeah, I mean, I'll address the other points and sort of my view and how they relate.
Yeah.
But that's sort of like sitting here in 1996 and saying like, well, what does Netflix have to do with Webvan, right? Well, they're all internet-enabled businesses. One of them will be a media empire that crushes all the studios, and the other will fail 5 times before it becomes DoorDash, right?
Okay, you mentioned 96. Mm-hmm. What were you doing in 96?
I was getting studying to get my driver's license in Ohio.
Oh, God. All right, I was running an internet company that Goldman Sachs had taken public. It was a $7 billion market cap. And then it went to like nothing. It was a search company. It was before Google came out. Then Google came out. It was crazy to see what happened so quickly. Are we feeling the vibes again? Are we seeing some of that, some of those same signals we saw in the bubble, especially as it relates to some of the more speculative, maybe Web-Vanny type things? Do you dare say that there might be some sort of reset on the horizon?
Yeah, I think the difference between that Web 1 era and then the Web 2 era and now is it's global, permissionless, and playing way faster, right? The barriers to capital are being broken down day after day. Sorry, VCs, it's more competitive now,
Maybe
right?
retire earlier.
But this is capital formation is now seamless. There's no barriers to entry, right? Anybody can play from anywhere in the world. And those things just weren't true in Web 1 and Web 2. Now, what is true is human behavior, getting overzealous about things, asset prices inflating, departing from fundamentals, defining what the hell are the fundamentals, right? I mean, how do you value Web 3 network over Web 2 for-profit business? This is an ongoing thing that we're all studying. And so it's the same humans playing the same game, just with far lower constraints. And so I think 10-year cycles are now 18-month cycles. And we'll get all the bad things and all the good things we did before, but it's way more fun to play this.
So if a reset happens, you think it'll be even more compressed, more dramatic, more exciting, and shorter lived?
Yeah, I think so. All those things.
Interesting.
Yeah, and real quick on NFTs, NFT it's just a technology, right? It just stands for a non-fungible token, ERC 721 or whatever they call it on the other blockchains. And it's just like this digitally scarce thing. It's a unique thing, a one of one or whatever. And that could be artwork, like a Bored Ape, or it could be a song track, or it could be like your ticket to something, or it could be like the fact that you certified this skill level on Braintrust, right? I mean, it's just technology, right? So there will be scammers, and there will be like tons of legit uses for it.
Yeah. The question is the value of those assets, and that seems all over the place right now.
Yeah, well, and that's what we have 24/7 global markets to decide that stuff now.
Yeah. You said the dirty word of venture capitalists, vulture capitalists. There's a little bit of a debate, as we all know online, about who owns Web3, and is this just another scam of the VCs to control the world? Do you believe that?
Well, I mean, there's a kernel of truth to all of these things. I mean, it's Jack Dorsey who famously said, "Don't be fooled by Web3. It's the VCs own it. You don't own anything." And then Andreessen blocked him. on Twitter.
That's a solution.
Yeah.
And then Elon bought Twitter.
And then Elon bought Twitter, and now there's an even more
Way
complicated.
above my pay grade.
There's an even more complicated troll war going on that I don't understand. Look, I think the difference now is when you would start a Web 2 business or Web 2 marketplace, it was incredibly capital intensive, right? The old playbook was you raise hundreds of millions or billions of dollars, usually from venture. You use that money to subsidize one or both sides of the marketplace, right? You're basically giving dollars away for 75 cents until you build up liquidity between your supply and demand. If you're lucky enough to break orbit, you come out the other side of this thing as a public company that's investor owned, right? 80, 90% investor owned. The only people who really got any value out of it were the founders and early investors. And now Wall Street owns it. And so the users were left holding the bag. There's nothing in it for them, right? They have no control over the marketplace where they make their living. And so the Web3 model just inverts that playbook, right? Raise as little money as possible, pick your investors wisely, pick investors who can actually help you build the network. Don't give it away, don't give control away, keep fees low or keep the rake zero, or if you're giving tokens away, you actually generate a negative rake, right? So if you disintermediate the platform, you're losing out, right? So create incentives to a flywheel to stay on the platform. It's a great use of a token. And then you come out the other end user controlled, right? So the users who make their living on the network also decide all the rules, decide the fees, decide the categories, decide who gets to play. And I mean, that's your DAO, right? And so in both equations, venture capital is completely necessary, but just like at 1/50th the level, right? So my advice would be like, and this is what we did with Braintrust, pick your investors wisely. Scott Scott and ACME co-led our Series A at Braintrust with another firm called Blockchain, Ken Seif. And so it was like traditional great marketplace VC combined with a pure crypto VC, co-led this Series A. It was only like $21 million, so it was
tiny.
It's a small A. But we got both of them just rolled up their sleeves and leaned in, and the entire firm's like, Braintrust is now a massive talent provider to banks, to fintech. Goldman Sachs is a huge client. Wouldn't have had that without Scott. Like certifiably, we'd still be screwing around in procurement. And Ken and Blockchain did tons to help us on the token economic design. And so these investors like really got in and helped build this network, and they became part of the community. Whereas like a lot of these sandhill firms who've now bolted on crypto funds and are just writing checks blindly, right? That's what Jack was probably talking about, right? Is these guys aren't going to add any value past the money. And if you do it right, you shouldn't need that much capital to build these things and get the network effects to grow strongly, because the token is the incentive model, right?
That's the crazy part of this, is the efficiency. Even if we wanted to have a stronger hand, we can't, because as you pointed out, you haven't raised that much money. And you don't need to. And thank you for the kind words about ACME. Okay, so we spent a little bit of time on your background as a founder and lessons learned. That could have been a whole discussion. We just talked about Web3. That clearly we could talk for hours on that. I want to get to Braintrust. And I want to get to, what is Braintrust today? Let's go back to this, your 6-year-old, your genius. Explain Braintrust to your 6-year-old, maybe your 3-year-old or something, just dumb it down a little bit, and keep it at its most basic level so we can kind of build off of that. And then I want to kind of end with the blah, the BHAG, I'm going to take over the world vision that I know you have. But let's start simple. What is Braintrust today? What are you doing? What are you transforming? Where'd the idea come from? How's it going?
Sure. So Braintrust is a global talent network. It connects knowledge workers with clients that need their services, today on a contract basis, right? So it's not full-time roles yet.
So give an example.
So an example, Goldman Sachs is a client on Braintrust. They need a bunch of back-end software built, so they're going to contract with 18 senior Java developers on Braintrust. And the Java developers have signed on. They have a Braintrust profile. The community has vetted them and made sure they have the skills that they say they have, so they're completely vetted enterprise talent. And then Goldman contracts them for a certain time, a certain price to do a job. That job's paid in dollars. And then where the Braintrust token comes in is the incentive mechanism and the governance mechanism for the network. So whoever referred Goldman, well, not in this case, because he had to do it. But in a normal, for a client that was referred by a community member, when Goldman transacts, the person who referred Goldman gets tokens. Same for the talent side. Whoever brought those Java developers in is getting tokens. And those tokens are used to control the network.
Okay, so before we go down the token route, stick to just the basic Fiverr, Upwork, it exists.
Yeah, so Talent Networks
exist. It's not a new concept.
Yeah. Upwork, Fiverr, Accenture.
How big is this market?
It's $1.5 trillion a year of global GSV, gross service volume, just in IT.
And growing.
Yeah.
And that's because workers are done working for the man?
It's because people, like, let me just do old way, new way. This is a good way to explain it, right? So the old way is, like, you want to work in IT. I mean, you could be doing what you guys are doing and, like, start your own startup. That's awesome. It's really rare, and it's the small bucket. But if you want to work in IT, you go to school, you learn the skills. You go to PwC, Deloitte, Accenture. They pay you a salary. They give you health care. And in exchange for that, they sort of rent you out to the big companies, you know, and they're marking you up 3 to 4x. They tell you where to go, what to do, who to work for. You have no autonomy, and you've traded all that, you know, for a steady paycheck and healthcare. New way. Get out of school, or hopefully you don't go to school. You just teach yourself. Learn some valuable skills. Make a Braintrust account. Prove that you know those skills. The community will vet you. And then pick any job you want on Braintrust that matches those skills. By the way, there's 10 times more demand on Braintrust than we have talent. And so you don't need to, like, start your own agency or pitch or whatever. You just select the jobs that you're qualified for, agree on a price, do the work. And it's all remote, 100%.
You work as a team? Do you have friends?
You could form a small team. You could do solo work. You can, if you have a team already, you can bring that team on, do whatever you want. And it's all remote, right? It's mandated remote, right? That we've taught the clients that they can't make you go to an office. That was hard. COVID made that easier. It was hard before. And then you do the work from wherever you want for the price you want. Oh, and because Braintrust is owned by its users, we don't charge ourselves a fee. So the fee schedule, so Deloitte's charging a 3x markup, or Top Talent is taking 50%. Braintrust takes 0% from talent. So now you pay no fees. You work where you want, when you want to. If you want to take a month off, fine. And you know, go surf in Hawaii or whatever.
So the developer pays, there's no take rate, so to speak.
There's no take rate on the talent side, yeah.
It's a cash market. They don't need to understand tokens.
Yeah, they don't have to interact with the tokens at all. On the client side, there's a 10% take rate, which is de minimis for them. That's paid in cash. That cash is sent to a smart contract, which goes and buys Braintrust tokens that are then sent to the Braintrust DAO.
Okay, pause. Because like that is it, right? That's in addition to all the other stuff of the 1/50th of the cost to create it, and it being a better environment for workers, et cetera. Just repeat a little slower what you just said about the 10% cash fee that Goldman pays, and what happens to that.
Yeah. So this is part of
Goldman pays what, $300,000 for a job?
Right. So they'll get a separate invoice. That 300 grand will go straight to the talent. Then they'll get a separate invoice for 30 grand. They'll pay in cash. And then whichever Braintrust node is handling Goldman Sachs will basically send that those US dollars, convert to USDC, send it to a smart contract, which the smart contract then goes out and buys Braintrust tokens in the open market, and then takes those Braintrust tokens, sends them to the Braintrust.
And that's happening today.
Yeah, it happens like every week or two.
And Braintrust is a floated token. Everyone could go buy it right now.
That's right. And so what that does is it recycles client fees. So instead of like that, you know, racking up on the balance sheet of a for-profit corporation and then being redistributed as dividends, it just goes and buys the Braintrust token out of the open market, sends it to the DAO, and then the community runs the DAO. Right? It's one token, one vote. I have tokens, so I can vote on the DAO, but I don't control it. It's not a company. It's a set of smart contracts that lives on Ethereum.
And as the GSV grows, this is a fixed 10% fee on or derivative of the GSV. So you would expect then that buyback. Are there new tokens being introduced?
There's not. There's only 250 million tokens that have ever been created, so it's a fixed supply.
Never to exceed.
That's right. Cryptographically impossible to make more.
Okay.
And so, you know, the token has various utility on the network. It's the governance system. It's the reward system. We're building and testing different staking features so you can stake tokens to win more business. Or now it's, you know, because we're so supply constrained now, you know, we're testing clients actually putting tokens up to get more proposals. And so it's this like, it's a utility token that bootstraps the ecosystem and allows people to, make more money as a freelancer, or if you're a client, get more qualified talent on your jobs.
Okay. So what's the valuation today of Braintrust? Or it's not a company, the coin cap?
Yeah, it changes dramatically. It's usually like around 800 or 900 million, something like that.
800 or 900 million.
Yeah.
And that was created with how much invested capital?
We've raised about 120.
But in the pre-launch, pre-token launch?
Yeah, about 25.
About 25 million.
Yeah.
And then you had some big investors. It was publicly disclosed that some very large investors came in.
Coatue and Tiger came in a few months ago.
Was that done as like a private placement?
Yeah, exactly.
So you sold tokens out of Treasury to them?
That's right.
Okay. Do their tokens have a vote?
As they unlock, they'll be votable.
Interesting.
So same as yours, right?
Yeah.
So any tokens that are locked up can't be voted, but as they unlock, they can be used for rating.
Okay. So we have a few minutes left, and this is the fun part where you get to kind of say, then what? So I think we're all there. We get what's going on. This is incredibly fascinating. I spent 13 years of my life at Goldman Sachs valuing businesses, looking at comps, multiples, taking companies public, convincing investors what's interesting and what's not. And we have a project going on right now. We're just trying to figure out what is this worth? Like, how do you can't comp this market cap, this coin cap thing, that you can't say Uber's GSV is X and it's a multiple of Y, because it isn't a business. There are no margins, there's no cash flow. So it's a fascinating thing to try to get your head wrapped around. But what you can immediately see is, wow, there is amazing value being created and captured and referred back in a very efficient, pure, defensible way to token holders. And that's cool. Because there's no decisions, right? You have no CEO or board who's saying, let's buy back shares, let's invest in R&D, let's dividend, let's do a share, nothing. It just automatically happens, so it's super cool. Now, you've got this token out there, it's an incredible currency. What can you do with it? How can you change the world?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is the beginning of sort of the unbundling of corporate America. So I think the old, the corporation exists to, accrue a bunch of talent, resources, and then either use them to build a product or rent them out for much more than you're paying them, right? And that's sort of the corporate model, the consulting model. And I just think Web3 signifies the beginning of the end of that model, right? And giving the value that talent create back, giving them autonomy back, and unbundling this like, hey, go sit in a cube farm and do what you're told model that we've been doing since whatever, the 60s or 70s. And so I think all knowledge workers will eventually make their living like this. You wouldn't think of going to a big consulting firm. If you work for a tech company as an employee, you're there because you're passionate about what they're doing and you want to be on that mission. Otherwise, you have full autonomy, right? And so you can, Braintrust just plugged in a few health insurance partners. Like, that's a big barrier to not being a freelancer. But the other big barrier is, like, most people don't want to like pitch clients all day. And with a network like Braintrust, there's like almost unlimited demand because the clients come where the talent are, and so you don't have to pitch, you don't have to create your own agency, you just pick jobs off. So today Braintrust is just tech. I think we'll see this in the legal field, paralegals, lawyers, accountants, compliance professionals, any knowledge worker.
But don't you need a culture and a water cooler and health benefits and all that stuff?
Well, we got health benefits, but yeah, you need a culture. I think this is what's going to make, today the culture is in Discord. So that's
fair.
If you're born before 1990, that could be tenuous. But look, I think that's what's going to make like the WeWorks and the Regises of the world, continue to be relevant, right? Like, people need to get out, people need to go to conferences, like we all need to be around each other still. But you don't need to be in a cubicle, you don't need to commute on the 101. How about that?
And right there, 0 seconds left. Adam, thank you so much. Every time I spend time with you, I get so pumped and excited about what we're doing together. So
awesome.
Thank you for taking the time. Thank you, guys.